When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to be talking about who played a better game, Varys or Littlefinger. Now, before this video starts, I wanted to say, first, I don't know where this background art is. Usually I have a link to the artist or whoever made it, but this one I found on Google Images, and I clicked the website, and it says it's not active anymore, so I'm not actually sure who made this art, so if you know, I guess give me the link. But yeah, so I just wanted to say at the beginning of this video, I'm not sure where this image came from. Also, before we get into the video, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment, please do. Helps channel grow and reach other people that might like this content as well. And let's get into it. So before we kind of say who played the better game, I want to preference the very beginning of this video that we don't know yet. Right? This video definitely depends on what happens in wins, kind of what their outcomes are, and kind of where each person ends up. I think they're both going to die, but it's going to be kind of who achieved their goals better in the end, even though they're maybe outdone. Also, I will say I am not going to take into account some of the things that we may or may not have happened in Robert's Rebellion. There's a lot of theories still about what some of these characters did in both of those that I don't want to touch too much on because A, they're not confirmed and we don't have a lot of information on them. So, for example, I think there's a really good theory that Littlefinger could have possibly helped start Robert's Rebellion because at the kind of crossing in, he would have been there around the time that possibly Rhaegar and Lyanna could have gone by there, and then he was also could have been there around the time that Brandon Stark was there, and could have possibly informed him of kind of what Rhaegar and Lyanna were doing. So that is one big reason, and it kind of makes sense to me. But again, that's not confirmed. Also, there are theories that kind of Varys was helping Robert Baratheon during the rebellion, maybe to curry favor if he was going to win. But again, we don't know that either. So there's a lot of question marks when it comes to Robert's Rebellion that we still haven't had answered about these two characters. But looking at what each character has done, so let's go through each character. So Varys kind of starts out being this kind of beggar, right? I'm going to pick up after he was kind of out of the circus type thing. And, you know, he gets cut and becomes basically kind of this like beggar. He's like a homeless person, right? And he eventually becomes a very good thief, as well as Illyrio Mopatis, who is one of his, you know, closer allies, as we know. And the two kind of start to make a really, you know, good partnership, right? And Varys becomes someone who's very good at selling information, getting information, having spies and stuff like that, to the degree that he's so successful that the Mad King kind of calls him over into, you know, Westeros on his you know, council to become the Master of Whisperers, right? Which is something that is really, really interesting because Varys is someone that leaps into power very quickly, right? He goes from being someone that has no power to someone that is one of the most powerful people in the entire kingdoms, right? And he is someone that kind of drives the Mad King even more insane just because he's telling him constantly these people that are betraying him and stuff like that. And Varys, for the most part, this is where a lot of his power is. And he doesn't really lose a lot of his power going into when Robert becomes the king. He has a lesser role as in Robert wasn't as dependent on knowing which people were his friends and which people weren't as the Mad King was. So I guess Varys did lose a bit of his influence when it came to that regard. Now, Varys' plan after that had been kind of mixed. We still don't know really what his actual plan is. We have speculation, and that's why I think Varys is a lot harder to predict than Littlefinger, right? On where his kind of plan and who has played the game better up to this point in the story. Because Varys says that he's supporting Daenerys, but then he also says later that he's supporting Aegon. So I've done a Varys video if you guys wanted to watch that. It's kind of a bit older at this point, but I was talking in that video a lot about Varys kind of has this idea where I think he wanted Viserys and Daenerys with the Dothraki to kind of come through, you know, Westeros and kind of cause a lot of chaos and weaken the kingdoms for Aegon to eventually come over. Because We know that Aegon gets control of the Golden Company, right? And I think he would have been backed by people like maybe the Dornish and stuff like that. So I think what Varys was planning was he wanted those, first two Targaryens to kind of weaken the kingdoms. And what he does is he's kind of trying to, especially earlier on in the books, he's trying to prevent kind of the war breaking out just then because it was just way too soon. Daenerys and Khal Drogo and Viserys were not ready to come across yet. So that was kind of the problem and why he was kind of going against Littlefinger, who kind of wanted war, while Varys didn't really want it yet. That's the key point. He didn't want it yet. He wanted it, but not yet. And that's kind of why he was kind of helping Ned, along the way slowly, because he did want the war to happen, just not as quickly as it ended up happening. And that's kind of why we even see why Varys tries to get Ned to kind of say, oh, Joffrey's the king and stuff, because he doesn't want war. He's trying to prevent war and then kind of have it break out as Daenerys is invading. And we'd already have these tensions kind of building between the Lannisters and Starks where you could see them flip on each other. And Varys, up to that point, doesn't do a terrible amount when it comes to really influential stuff that gains him power, right? He becomes kind of friends with the Tyrells, kind of, helps them out a bit. But, and he also kind of helps thwart Littlefinger's plan to kind of get Sansa. But with that being said, Varys, we still don't really know how well he's played this game yet, because we just don't know yet. We know that he wants Aegon to become the king, right? And we want all that stuff to happen. And Varys has done a very good job of creating a lot of chaos in King's Landing while Littlefinger's been gone, where he's kind of turned the Lannisters against the Tyrells, right? While he's doing all these things like with Tyrion's escape and all that, and kind of creating all of this paranoia in Cersei's mind that the Tyrells are against her, right? And in that regard, he's done a really good job to kind of sow all this chaos so that when Aegon does come over in this next book, it's going to be a lot easier to take them on, as in if they weren't unified, right? Killing Kevin Lannister, killing Pycelle, and then making the Tyrells look like they've done it is a very, really key stroke of genius. Also securing Tyrion for possibly Daenerys, who also ends up giving Aegon some advice. Very strong political move by Varys. So when we look at a lot of the things that Varys is doing, a lot of what Varys has been doing has been building up to the next book. So to kind of see how good of a player Varys has really been, it's going to rely a lot on the next book. If Varys falls flat and this doesn't end up working at all, then yeah, Littlefinger definitely wins. But with this being said, I want to talk about who is the best Game of Thrones player between the two right now. And right now it has to be Littlefinger. I think Littlefinger is chiefly responsible for the War of the Five Kings. He is someone that, yes, started out at a little bit of a higher position than Varys, because Littlefinger is this character that kind of starts where he really is just a part of a smaller house. He doesn't really have a lot to his name, and he ends up getting into a lot of really high power situations, right? He ends up, having the Brandon Stark thing where he gets, basically sliced and all of that, almost dies. And he kind of learns from then on to just not fight that way, right? He's not a good fighter and all that, and he has to kind of play the mind games type role. And Littlefinger eventually figures out that his way of power is through Lysa. Lysa always has, liked him and stuff like that, even though he has not liked her. And he kind of uses that, right? We see him use all of that power to eventually get himself into a position with, Jon Arryn and King's Landing, being kind of the master of coin and all that stuff. And he uses this power to even get even more power, right? Where he puts the crown in such debt and cripples the entire economy of King's Landing and of Robert Baratheon's kind of rule, that it puts them in such a difficult situation, because it puts them in debt to not only Tywin, but it puts them in debt to the Iron Bank, and even, more people than that. But those two being the main two, it kind of creates this conflict, right? But the whole time, it seems like, he's made himself so influential because, A, they're in such a bad spot, and he's also always able to find the coin. It makes him very valuable. And you see how Tyrion struggles with the role at the very beginning of trying to be the Master of Coin, and it shows how well Littlefinger used that position to make him almost indispensable. And that's the key part of what Littlefinger does. He makes himself so valuable that you'd rather have him than see him removed or dead, right? And not only this, he then also uses his kind of power over Lysa to eventually get Jon Arryn killed. Now, Littlefinger does this for a few reasons. One, he wants kind of revenge on the Starks because he knows that Robert will instinctively look to make Ned the Hand, because Ned is really one of the few people that Robert really trusts at this point. And he also wants to do this to create conflict and chaos, which is what we know Littlefinger's main thing is. He kind of likes to create this chaos that gives him a better and more advantageous play to gain power, right? And we see Littlefinger do everything that he does with Ned, and, you know, and kind of Catelyn really is the person that helps Littlefinger in this situation, telling Ned to trust him and all that. And we see how that plays out, right? Littlefinger helps Ned along and then eventually betrays him. And Littlefinger gains all this power, right? We see with, you know, kind of Tyrion offering up Harrenhal as kind of a little, you know, a little laugh almost, which he does eventually get. And the biggest kind of maneuver that Littlefinger makes, right, is getting the Tyrells and the Lannisters together. Because A, this gives him, you know, Tywin awards him with Harrenhal and all that stuff. He also then gets himself in a situation where he can try to bring in Lysa and the Vale kind of into the fold with the Lannisters. So this gives him a lordship, which makes it a lot easier to, you know, make an alliance with, or make a marriage, make it a worthy marriage to Lysa after Jon dies. So now, you know, we also see that kind of Littlefinger's also kind of made this role of Lord Paramount of the Trident as well. So you get that. He is going to be married into the Vale, and just like that, look how much power Littlefinger has gotten. He, you know, has a spy network as well that's very important, just like Varys's. He has all this influence over kind of the finances of the crown that makes him indispensable. He slowly has gained all of this power, making him one of the most powerful people in the entire Seven Kingdoms. And even then, we see that Tyrion, who in Book 2 was in a position that he could have tried to kind of get rid of Littlefinger, and he even thought about it, right? Because of kind of how Littlefinger sets up Tyrion to be captured. If Catelyn, you never runs into him or anything like that, by telling him that telling her that the dagger was Tyrion's. Tyrion even thinks to arrest and probably kill Littlefinger, but he even thinks in his mind, could I actually get away with it? Who knows, you know, how many people are under Littlefinger's payroll and stuff like that, and he thinks it's just too dangerous. So it shows you how much power that Littlefinger really does have at this point. And to me, you look at where Littlefinger is sitting, right? He also then, after doing all this other stuff we just talked about, helps kill Joffrey to again create chaos, to gain some favor with the Tyrells, who look like the more powerful house that's coming out of this at this point now. And with it being said, he also smuggles Sansa Stark out, who he probably has a thing with because she looks a lot like Catelyn. So when you look at all these things on what Littlefinger has acquired, he's acquired an army, he's acquired one of the bigger kingdoms, he's acquired a castle, he's acquired possibly a bride that he would like. And this person also, in Sansa Stark, will give him a claim to the north, and also, you know, a better claim on the Riverlands as well. So you look at the way Littlefinger has kind of crafted his plan to kind of take the throne. He's done a very good job, right? And again, I don't want to speculate into kind of the future books with either one of these characters and what they're going to do, because I think it ruins who's the better player right now. And I think if we really look at it, I think Littlefinger at this point has to be the better player. Now, I think this is going to get unraveled. I think by the end, I think Varys will be the better player, because I think Littlefinger's undoing is going to be Sansa. And when you look at Littlefinger, he's probably going to make some sort of blunder to let Sansa kind of know that he's not a good dude and that she's going to end up, you know, betraying him or something like that. You're going to look at that mistake, and then the mistake of also getting Sansa, who ends up killing him, or being part of the reason he dies or something like that. I definitely think Varys could be the one that ends up on top between the two, because I think Varys will be put into a very big position of power when Aegon does take the throne. But for right now, and the 5 books we've gotten, I believe that Littlefinger did play the game better. Let me know what you guys think, who the better player was, and who you think is going to be the better player in the next few books. Let me know if I'm right, if I'm wrong, and I will see you guys all in the next video. Bye, guys.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.